So the reason why I'm doing this presentation, is this loud? Going to be loud enough? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, last night I did a soccer training for about 40, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds at an indoor facility. So I kind of blew my voice out a little bit. So hopefully it'll be able to hold up. But if I start to get a little bit scratchy or something like that, I apologize in advance. So the reason that I did put together this presentation, Stephanie had sent out a list of possible topics for presentations. So every time we do the evaluations, people actually write what they'd like to see presentations on. And interventions in long-term care or in nursing homes was on the list, 3 or 4 times. And so obviously that's an issue that people had some interest in. So it wasn't necessarily my first choice, but I figured, I might as well be able to do this. So again, I'm Tom Eckert. I was hired with the Counseling Source in 1998, so I've been here for 19 years. We were just talking a little bit off before we started here that there's been a lot of changes even in the nursing homes since I started. So when I first started with the Counseling Source, the majority of the folks we worked with in nursing homes were older people, older adults. And with everybody, we had a testing packet. We did mostly psychologists in the group at the time. We did cognitive testing with everybody at the start and a lot of dementia testing because that was appropriate to the population we worked with. Now these days, I have very few older adults that I work with on my caseload. The majority of people are younger, a lot of short-term rehab stays, a lot of mental health clients, and just a completely different feel to how things are. So in this presentation, I'm not going to say, I'm necessarily the best expert on this. I think everybody has their own styles that they use in the work that we do. And so, during the presentation, if you have some ideas, and I'm going to present some of the ways that I do things and some of my conceptualizations. And anytime I do a presentation or if I attend a presentation, I can walk away with 2 or 3 new ideas or something that makes me think a little differently than even if I was there for 2 hours, I feel like I was able to get something out of it. So I don't think any of this is going to be earth-shattering, but maybe give you a little bit something different to think about. If you have ideas or things you'd like to add, again, please speak up, because I think part of this is also a little bit of a support group, or, just sort of making sure everybody realizes, that kind of normalizing things that we all kind of go through a lot of the same things. And when we work out in isolation, sometimes you forget that everybody is kind of going through the same things. So, so that's part of this as well. So, okay, so a couple of general conceptualizations before I put out my notes, and so I've got a lot of things that I'll add to the notes, but those are sort of a starting point for me. A couple of things, just general conceptualizations before I start. So my general conceptualization of any of the counseling work we do, whether it's in nursing homes or anywhere else, I always think of it as, I get sent into the forest, to go find this person and help them out. So that's my general conceptualization. So I get a referral, now I got to go into the woods and I got to find this person. So there's a lot of different parts to that process. First assessing the situation. Some of the clients have been in the forest for 15 years and want to tell me that I should follow them out. Those people are personality disorders. Other people that are just more like adjustment disorders that just need a little bit of direction, need to be calmed down a little bit. And I also have to sort of figure out what resources they have available physically, as far as emotionally. And so that's sort of my general conceptualization. So here I am, I'm wandering into the woods, I'm the rescue party, the nursing home has now asked me to help get this person out. And so that's sort of the first place that I start. So I'll kind of keep coming back to that reference as we go, because again, that's my starting point. So, and the other conceptualization that I start with, and this is sort of just sort of my own theory in how I categorize folks that I work with. So one of the first parts of my assessment is, it's a very simple idea. I try to assess how well this person can believe. So, it sounds like a simple idea. So if you think about it, the way I explain it to them is that, you could put people on a scale of how good a believer you are. So this is where I need the whiteboard to draw on. That's okay. That's okay. I'm just going to do what I do with my clients. I'm just going to talk with my hands. So here's the way I start out. So I'll start out and I'll say, just a general conceptualization. So on one end of the scale, so I've got a scale, are people who will believe almost anything you tell them. Okay, and you don't want to be down that end of the scale. That means you're gullible, and you're sending money for lottery tickets overseas and things like that. Not a good place to be. So way down on the other side are people that I consider concrete. Now, people who tend to be concrete are the people who can only believe what they can see. Okay, that's not a very good place to be either, because a lot of what we need emotionally is not concrete. So whether people care about you, whether people love you, is not a concrete thing. So you're always having to test people if you're way over on the other end of the spectrum. So you can kind of, throw a normal curve over top of it. The majority of people are somewhere in the middle, kind of one side or another. And so I usually say, it has a little bit to how you're wired as a person emotionally. So I tend to be skeptical. So I'm not a great believer. This is just how I am. So sometimes that serves me well on the job, because I really don't believe anything anybody tells me. I'm always going to ask another question. I'm always going to, check and ask, does this really fit in with what I believe is reality? So, but belief doesn't come easy to me. So again, that'll kind of go back to later on what sort of things I need as far as interventions, how well I can believe. And so people who are good believers, tend to be able to get help from self-help books, and you can do positive affirmations, and they seem to work. Positive affirmations for me, I look and I go, what? That's not, how does this work for anybody? My brain can absolutely not process that. It doesn't work. And so a lot of what we do, as far as interventions, I've got to be able to see where this person is. So if they are not a good believer, then we've got to be able to connect them to things that are more concrete. How they define themselves as a person. Again, I'll define myself by the things that I'm doing. I'm not going to start out by saying, well, I'm a people person. I'm going to say I'm a counselor. I'm a soccer coach. I do all these things. So I'm connected. My who I am as a person and my self-concept is very connected to the things that I'm doing. And so again, as we start to look at interventions, this is one of my conceptualizations. What is this person going to need? Because it may be different than other people. So, and again, as far as interventions, my first title for this was Effective Interventions in Long-Term Care, and then I realized that was just a little bit too over the top, because what's effective is a lot of times very relative, kind of as we get back into this. So, and what's effective for me might not be effective for other people. Our personality and what we bring as far as our style has a lot to do with what works. And so it's very difficult for me to say, here's the things I do. These are ideas. You may or may not be able to do these things. Again, the comfort level some people have, their ability to trust me, and just my presentation, and how genuine I'm able to be. And so that's kind of my general starting point. So now I'll kind of get on to the into my notes here. So first area I have is obstacles and limiting factors to providing treatment in nursing homes. And so there's a lot of these. And you can kind of add on as we go. I'm going to go through some things as I go on here that I'm sure you can add to. So the first thing I have down here is what I call the language barrier. And this is sort of one of the conceptualizations I developed a number of years ago. So one of the things I realized, I'm sure you've had this, you have the clients who say, I want to be back home, I want to be back home. And I asked the social worker, and the nurses, and they said, you can't do that, you're going to have to live here forever, ever, 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 ever. And so there seems to be a problem there because the person says, well, I can do this, and nobody believes me, nobody wants to trust me. And so that's a big issue with a lot of folks. And so one of the things I realized is, the difference is, between the quality of life and quantity of life. Okay, and so what the nursing homes are good at is quantity of life. And so basically even the nursing homes that I don't believe necessarily provide good care, and I wonder about how invested some of the people are into the care, they firmly believe they're doing good work. They believe they can keep these people healthier than if they were at home. They believe they can extend their life. They believe that this is going to be a better place, that they provide good care. So this is where they're coming from. So when they talk to the clients say, I want to go back home, they're saying, well, you know what, if you go back home, you're going to get sick again, and you're going to end up in worse shape. Now, the clients are talking about quality of life. Now, quality of life is I can get up when I want, I can eat the things I want, I have my own cable TV, I can walk outside, I can have visitors because people don't mind coming to my home. They don't necessarily like coming to a nursing home. So that's quality of life. Now, there's a completely different thing. So, the clients aren't necessarily worried about quantity of life as much as they would like quality of life. And so, I always say, if sky opened up one day, and I'll say this to clients, sky opens up and you hear this voice from above and it says, all right, here's your choice. I'll give you 3 years in this nursing home or you can have 1 year at home. What would you choose? And almost everybody will say, I would take the 1 year at home versus 3 years at a nursing home. So what does that speak to? That means, what's going to be important to you? For me, I'd take the year at home. Why? Because the quality of my life, being able to have some privacy, to be able to have my own space, to do my things, to watch what I want to watch on TV, and again, that's the difference. So that when I talk about the language barrier, it's trying to teach my clients, when you're having this disagreement with the staff, part of it is because you guys are speaking different languages. Now, if you can start to talk to them and say, you know what, I'm willing to take the chance. And well, you can't take care of yourself, or you're going to get sick if you go back out. You know what? That's a chance that some people would be willing to take. But often they're not given that choice. Also, this is just a side note. If you ever want to just kind of, every once in a while, just to amuse myself, I'll ask, like the social worker or one of the nurses, where do you think this person's going to be in 3 years? And they'll look at you because, for some reason, they've never thought of that. Because future in the nursing home is 3 months long. That's it. Up until the next time that they have their care meeting. Nobody ever thinks about where this person's going to be in the future. So you've got somebody in their 50s, they've got some health problems. Ask, where do you think this person will be in 3 years? How about 5 years? And they'll just say, well, they're long-term. Okay, they're long-term. What does that mean? That means this person is 55 years old. So you really believe that they're going to be here, for the next 20 years? And they'll just kind of look at you. They don't really think about that. So, again, that speaks also to, that being in a nursing home, it's a difficult way to live. So again, that's what I call the language barrier. So the next one, this is where my big list of things comes in. So this is the nursing homes tend to be, as I put, toxic, unhelpful, and dysfunctional cultures. So now I shortened that because I had some other things in there as well. And now I don't add these things in here just because, it's an opportunity for me to complain. There is actually a little bit of reasoning behind this. So, it's important to be able to understand all these things that we see, our nursing home residents experience. And where we might see it for a day, for a couple hours while they're there all the time. And so you do have to be aware of these things, So, we complain about them, and talk about them with each other, but they have to live this, which makes it a very big challenge for them. So, and it also affects, again, I have these listed as obstacles to what we're able to do, because we all show up wanting to get these people out of the forest, and so, the forest is not an easy place to get out of, just because we've got all of these barriers in front of us. So, so here I'll start down my list. Substandard treatment. Again, I guess this is relative, but I think we all have times where, and I think sometimes I'll put it to my clients as, when you get into a nursing home, a lot of times the staff lack curiosity as far as your medical needs. They're not willing to investigate things, So, just as an example, I had a gentleman a couple years ago, maybe about a year ago, that I worked with in a nursing home, which is one of my better places. So he comes in, he had been deteriorating. I mean, he's, pencil thin. The guy has cancer, but he also has cataracts, and as time goes on, he has trouble with his hearing. And so, he had spent his whole life, he worked at the drop-in center. He was there. He was like, Buddy Gray's, second-hand man. He was there when a guy got shot, and he had a very compelling story. Plus, he was a few years older than me. He grew up in my neighborhood. So this guy grows up in my neighborhood. We can talk about the old, hey, remember the swim club? He went to the same school as me and all these things. So, it's one of these guys that I just connected with because he's, basically comes from the same neighborhood. So, because he was dying, basically, they decided not to take care of his cataracts. So the guy can't see, and that's a problem. So now he can't watch television. When people came into the room, he never knew who it was. And I would try to ask the staff, hey, can you make sure you identify yourself to him, because he has no idea who you are, why you're there. He can't see, and you guys won't do anything about it. And so then his hearing basically goes. And I'm asking the staff, can you see it? It might just be his ears are clogged. But now I'm having to yell at him. Not only can he not see, now he really can't hear anything either. And he's pencil thin. And so he actually starts, gaining some weight. They take him off of hospice. But now he still can't see, and he can't hear anything. So his biggest problem was he didn't die quick enough. And so, I worked with him for about 6-8 months, and they had expected him to be there for, less than a month. And so, again, and it's those sort of things that, just the obstacle. Hey, if you could have helped him with even get his ears unclogged, then maybe it would help me to be able to help him a little bit more as well.
Angie Swearingen is wondering online, Tom, why the staff didn't take care of the cataracts. Isn't that basically neglect, she asks?
To me it was, but they said, basically they lacked curiosity. The guy said he can't see. You could see he has cataracts, but I don't know if it was his insurance wouldn't pay for it. No one seemed concerned except really, this guy, because he can't see anything. And then I was very concerned as well, and especially the ears. If they could at least, looked in his ears, well, we'll put him on the list for the next time the doctor comes in. And it's like, couldn't you send him out to somebody, No, so no one would really do anything, and it was really difficult to watch, and then he did eventually pass away. And of course, I'll just skip down the list here because it kind of goes into the nobody knows nothing about nothing, So one of the things, if not the biggest thing, so of course I go to see my client. This is the guy that I'm just talking about. Of course, his room is empty now. His chart's gone, which is usually not a good sign. And of course, I ask staff, hey, can you tell me what happened, to my guy there? And the answer is, I was not working that day. Of course, it seems ironic that, everybody seems to die on a day when nobody's working. So maybe that's part of the problem. But almost everybody I ask, whenever I ask that question, my response is, I'm really not sure. I wasn't working that day. which, you know what, I had been working with this guy that people I've worked with for years, and no one has any information for me about what happened. I've got to find that person who's willing to actually tell me what happened. You know, so it's a shame that, you know, when we ask simple things, hey, have you seen this client? You know, the other week I was trying to find a guy, and, you know, have you seen him? You know, and like, well, I think he's in smoking a cigarette. So I stand around for a few minutes. You know, then the nurse comes by and he asks me, you know, who are you looking for? And I'm like, well, I'm looking for so-and-so. Oh, you know, he left. He went out with his sister. He's going to be gone for the rest of the evening. Okay, well, I've been standing here for 15 minutes for him getting ready to be done with a cigarette, and I guess I've wasted my time. And so it is difficult for us to provide care when people don't take the time to provide information to us. You know, and it's very simple. You know, if I'm a nurse and I've been working there and I took 2 days off, I got report. I asked somebody, you know, hey, what happened to Mr. So-and-so? Well, you know what, he passed away, you know, overnight, and, you know, so-and-so was there. Every once in a while, somebody's willing to tell me the whole story, which is nice. There are people out there who do that, you know, but it's too often that they're not willing to provide even basic information to us. So, okay, back down my list. Long wait times for assistance. You know, again, this is one of the things that folks are used to. You know, you hit the call light, you got to go to the bathroom, and it's going to take an hour. You know, or sometimes somebody will come in, turn the light off, and then disappear. Exactly. I'll take care of you in a minute. And then they go. Or sometimes, and I'm pretty much, when I come in and meet with my folks, I make sure that their call light is available. Because a lot of people, it will be on the floor. And for some of those people, it was not put on the floor by the client. And so, you know, I will go in, if I see somebody's call light is not where it should be, I'm going to clip it right next to them, and I'm going to remind them, if you need anything, you make sure you hit that. And so, again, that's one of those things that's difficult for us, because we end up being the complaint department a lot of the times, and there's nothing we can do about it. And so, again, that's difficult, because we have issues we'd like to be able to work on, you know, but you're processing, you know, complaints a lot of the time. So, inconsistent staffing. So one of the nursing homes I work at just was bought by, you know, a larger corporation. So in the past year, and I just found out, you know, my wife happened to know the administrator. So they're going to be on their 6th administrator this year. They've had 5 DONs and 3 social workers. You know, so I honestly stopped introducing myself to administrators, you know, because, you know, I don't know. It's not, I don't know if the person's going to be there. So, but it's difficult, again, for us, you know, the clients see this, you know, no one ever addresses it. Every time they get a new administrator, they don't have a meeting, the new DON doesn't introduce themselves, you know, they don't seem to have any idea of who's providing their care sometimes. And then it's difficult for us at the same time, because we're not getting our information. It makes it difficult for us. So, unprofessional reactions by staff. Most of the folks, you know, I know they were trained, some people were trained in care, or they should be trained in care, but mostly it's their parenting style. You know, so I see how nurses react, and I can bet you that is how they treat their kids at home. And so a lot of times, you know, it is demeaning towards the residents. It makes them feel like kids, because, you know, you need to do this, you need to do that. You know, if you do that again and you don't stop yelling, I'm going to call your psychiatrist and you're going to get sent out. You know, those type of threats. And that's, you know, it is difficult, again, for us to work in that environment, because we see that, you know, and then we have to be able to talk our clients through those issues, you know, and again, they still have to live through it every day. So, lack of understanding or training regarding mental health issues or dementia issues. And this is another one of those things. You know, blocked behavioral units are a combination of dementia clients and schizophrenics. And those are 2 very diverse, different populations. The only thing that's similar is that they don't play bingo. And so there are no activities generally on those units when they could engage folks in a better way. You know, but They don't tend to. And a lot of times I'll have to help educate. I remember I went, if Deanna's out there. Hey, thank you. I went with her to do an evaluation on a client that she had. He was on a dementia unit. He's in his early 50s, and he was being combative to staff. And so again, this is a dementia unit. So they must have known something was going on. Well, did the evaluation. It was very evident that he had an alcohol dementia. And so he could not remember 5 minutes ago. So every time staff came in, he had no idea where he was. He had no idea who anybody was. They would just come in and start getting him up out of bed and start trying to provide care to him, and he would be hitting them. And so, we had to sit down, as we were leaving after doing the evaluation. Deanna and I talked to the nurse who was in charge of the unit and had to explain what was going on and how they could help this guy by reorienting him and talking to him before they provided any care. Now, this is a unit that was providing services to dementia clients and did not seem to have basic understanding of how to provide this care, or didn't seem concerned about trying to figure it out, which comes back to the whole curiosity thing. So, all right. Unwillingness to talk about death and dying. Now, this is part of the reason I think that nobody wants to tell me what happened to my client, and nobody was working that day. But I've worked at cases before where there's no mention of people who pass away. They basically, everybody saw them go out on a stretcher. There wasn't a back door. And so after the person passed away, people would come in and take stuff out of the person's room, or meet the family there and ask, hey, can I have the TV? But that was the only mention of the person, and I think that's, very disrespectful. A lot of times the nurses don't really want to deal with the issues of death or dying, which is, the huge elephant in the room here. Most of the folks are there, to stay. And so one of the places I go, in Lincoln Crawford, actually, they will have a memorial for people. They post a picture of the person with a life history. And if the person is going for hazard services off-site, they'll actually transport people to the funeral, which is tremendous because, again, it talks to the dignity. I don't think anybody wants to die forgotten. And so it's so wonderful to see a place that is willing to deal with that, because so many places it's like, we really don't want to talk about it because they're worried that the clients will be worried about dying. Or whatever. Sometimes I've heard some explanations of, hey, why don't you guys do something? And they'll say, well, we don't want to upset the clients. Okay, you don't want to upset them, but you're not honoring them. It's more upsetting to not talk about the person because now, I know that when I go, I'm going to be wheeled out. Someone's going to grab my TV and whatever clothes fits, and I'm just going to be forgotten forever. And that's a horrible way to feel. So, again, that's, one of those things that I wish folks would do better. And that's part of our responsibility then, I think. It gives us the opportunity, but it doesn't get reinforced in ways that would be helpful to us. So I talked a little bit about some of these others. The Les Nessman syndrome. Okay, so this is for people who remember WKRP in Cincinnati, the show from years ago. So like I said, sometimes in order for me to understand things, I have to find a way to conceptualize them in a way that makes sense to me. And so this is one of my conceptualizations. So if you remember on the TV show, Les Nessman, this is a radio show for the younger people out there who don't know this. It was a radio show in Cincinnati and a station, and the newsman's name was Les Nessman. Now, he thought he was more important than other people and he should have his own office. Now, they didn't have an own office, so because he didn't have his own office, he put tape on the floor around his desk. And you couldn't just walk through it, so if you wanted to talk to him, he would ignore you until you stepped up to where the door was supposed to be and knock on it. And so once you did that, then you were allowed to come in. So he pretended like he was in back behind walls. And so the Les Nessman syndrome, the nursing station, the things that people talk about around the nursing station is unbelievable. you know. And I don't think they act as if not only privacy issues, but just personal things. You know, some of the comments they make, I'm appalled. If my mom was in the room right there, I would be hot. You know, I would be very, very unhappy with the things that some of the folks are talking about. Now, I just go about my business. I'm a fly on the wall most days, you know, but I don't think they understand, you know, if they're talking about, you know, especially client issues, if they're talking about client issues right in front of everybody. Every nursing station and every nursing home has a group of people who sit around the nursing station so that they can hear what's going on, not only with the residents, but with the nurses. You know, it gives them something to do. And so, you know, there are people who know everybody's business. And sometimes I'll ask those clients, hey, what's going on with this? And they will tell me because they know everything, right? And so the nurses will shoo the people away and go, hey, you can't sit over by the nursing home or by the nursing station here, you know, and they'll act as if they are behind their walls. And so as far as we go, you know, I'll always, you know, somebody started, the social worker will come up to me. Almost everybody has a back room, and there's a reason there's a back room. Part of it is because that's where you give report or should give report and allow a little privacy. So you just take the person over and you go, hey, you know, can you tell me what's going on with my guy there? And, you know, we have to sometimes assert ourselves because there's these imaginary walls. And so just an interesting side note, I looked up privacy, you know, privacy issues, so with HIPAA, and it's actually protected. The nurses talking in the nursing home behind the nurses station is protected information, even though everyone can hear it. Amazing. I mean, as much as we talk about privacy issues and things like that, I am just floored that that's protected. You know, it should be downplayed a little bit, but it is protected.
I looked that up once myself, Tom, and there's some really vaguely written clause that says something to the effect of, you know, within reasonable limits and at the staff member's discretion, which basically means you shouldn't be doing this, but we realize it's going to happen and we can't sue you every time.
Right.
It's okay. I can't.
So we have a question or a comment.
Well, this is something that you and I mentioned a few weeks ago, is that the residents that are listening to the nurses talk have no HIPAA responsibility at all and are completely free to speak among themselves anything they hear at any time. And if the nurses give them grief for that, it's not accurate.
Right. And this is from that story, and you can add on this. Magdalene had talked about this to me because one of the nurses had basically verbally attacked one of the residents for sharing information and was saying that it was, you know, HIPAA, privacy, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, this person has no responsibility, you know. And that's one of those things, just kind of also another side note, you know, if you have somebody that you're meeting with in the room, you know, and I always go over privacy with my residents and say privacy in a nursing home is a very relative thing. You know, I cannot protect what your roommate hears. You know, I'll offer you a better space if it's available, but you're going to have to be okay with that. You know, so you do always want to make sure that, you know, hey, I can't protect. You know, the same when I'm in my office. Sometimes somebody wants to bring, you know, a girlfriend, hey, can my boyfriend come into the session? Sure, you know, it's your privacy. You know, it is your privacy. If you want this person to come in, I cannot protect things that you say from him if he goes, puts it on social media later or whatever. You know, I can't protect that, you know, but again, you have to understand it is your privacy. So, all right, so this is the last one. You know, the general operating procedure in most nursing homes is that everybody there is right up to here with work. And if you ask for one more thing, it's too much. And so, hey, you know, Mr. So-and-so, you know, his bag just burst and it's a little bit of a problem. Can I get somebody to help? I'll see if somebody's available. You know, it's like, well, that's an issue. He's very uncomfortable now, and it really, really is impossible to meet in his room because it really now is it smells. And so, to put it lightly. But anytime you ask for something, and you can imagine, again, it frustrates me because they're simple things. You know, I'm not able to meet with my client because he's not ready. You know, they're not comfortable. They're not wanting to meet with me because they need to be cleaned up. And now I have to wait 2 hours, you know, for them to sit for an hour before somebody will help them. And it's all because everybody was too busy. So at that same time, all of the residents understand that they can look out their window and see the aides in the parking lot smoking cigarettes. You know, they understand that the nurses were just spending a half hour ordering lunch. Now, this is what happens. And so, you know, as much as we see it, again, this is what our residents live. So if anybody wants to add anything to that, I don't think I covered everything. So if anybody has any other things, because again, these are things that if you haven't seen them before, you know, you must work in different nursing homes than I work.
I have a big question, big picture question here from Mac.
Okay.
It might come up later, so if it is, that's fine. But he was wondering, at what point is it our goal as counselors to help healthier clients move out of nursing homes? That sort of framed as an intervention in and of itself. I didn't know if you were going to discuss that at all.
I will forget to discuss that later, unless I answer it now. Okay.
Fair enough.
So it is not necessarily our responsibility. And this partly comes from, I worked mental health case management for about 8 years before coming to long-term care. So my first month on the job, I basically figured out how to get all of my people out. But that wasn't my job. But I could see a route to get absolutely everybody that I worked with into the community. I knew what resources they could provide them so that they could have a decent level of care. And I was told that I needed to stop thinking like a case manager and start processing as a counselor. And that was probably Eric Burko, who was my supervisor. The one thing I remember he said to me that was most important is, I got to start thinking like a counselor. And so it wasn't my job to get everybody out. And so because of that, I had to figure out how to help them deal with being there versus getting them out. Now, coming back to my big picture, people who are good believers and people who struggle with belief. A lot of times we get people who are not doing their physical therapy and things like that, or they've been told they can't walk. And so I'll get a referral on somebody, and the referral will be, can you just hit this person over the head with a bigger hammer to convince them they will never walk again? And because that doesn't sit well with me, I'll sit down with the client and I'll say, what do you have to do? What's it going to take for you to walk out of here? You know, and they'll say, well, I'm going to have to work really hard in physical therapy. I'm going to have to do these things. I'm going to have to lose a little bit of weight. And I go, okay, that's our goal. Our goal is to push you as far as you can go. And I've had people then be able, who were not supposed to ever walk again, you know, manage to walk out of a nursing home. And it was my job originally, you know, I was sent in the woods to basically bury the person and not bring them out. And I refused to do that because I did not think that was right. Now, the backside of that also is, if this person has to accept their need for care, if they're not a good believer, they're going to have to see that. Somebody telling them you can't walk is not going to sit with them until they get themselves as far. How far can you go with what you have? When they run out of potential, then it's going to be a very difficult adjustment for them, but then they're going to have to look and say, you know what, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I do, with almost everybody, talk to them about what it would take to get out, because I love seeing people get back out into the community. It's not our responsibility, and I always tell the clients, it's not my responsibility to do that, and if I did it, then the nursing home would kick me out because they're not going to want me here. However, I do talk about it with everybody. You know, what would it take? What would you have to be able to do? Because sometimes it helps the opposite. It helps them to come to an acceptance of what they need, you know, versus people just telling them, which just doesn't work for them. So did I answer that question?
See, the service here. Thanks, Cece. I think it's also therapeutic if when the client says, I want to get out, and you process what's it going to take to get out, and then they go through the steps of trying to reach that goal, and they fall short, and you process each one of those experiences with the client. Eventually, that whole "you're never going to walk again" doesn't ever have to come from the therapist.
Right.
Another part is that I think the issue of moving out and going back to being independent, or as independent as they can be. I think that if we as clinicians can help the clients accept responsibility for that process, I mean, we could easily walk them through it, find them phone numbers, and help them do these things. But I think part of getting out is actually achieving those steps on their own, proving that they can do each one of those things so that when they're on their own, you really did it. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So you just backed me up.
So yeah, I think it is a good to at least talk about and to challenge people, you know, because it does, like I said, for some people just being told, I have people who go in and they say, you know what, I realize I'm not going to be able to do this.
Sorry.
All right. But, you know, I think you have to understand a little bit, coming back to the interventions, you have to understand what the person's needs are. What point do they have to get to? And so another point I want to add in there, and this is, I didn't write it in my notes, but part of what we do, and this is, again, the way I see it, we are the quality to people's lives. So that is my main responsibility. You know, when I have, you know, a new supervisee that says, what am I supposed to do with this person? You know, it's like, well, part of what you do is you add the quality to their life. You have conversations that no one else will have with them. You know, you talk to them, you let them share stories, you listen to them, you know, you joke with them. I have running jokes with some of my folks, you know, and it's those things that add quality to life. And so that's really what we do in a big picture of what we provide. We provide a counseling service, but we add quality to people's lives where they just don't have that. And so our coming in and listening to all their complaints, you know, again, that's what we do. That's quality that we add to people's lives.
Maureen Johnson online says that she really likes that, Tom. Right before you had said that she had just finished typing out a statement saying that she wants to be encouraging but not unrealistic with those residents, and we get put in that weird position with the social workers who want us to make them realize you're never going home, but the client just insists that they can.
And I think, again, it's part of the first time anybody ever asked me to do that, I was appalled, you know, because that's not how I work. That's not how I think. You know, again, in case management, it was not an option. You know, we were supposed to keep people out of the hospital and do whatever it took. That was our mission. And so it wasn't, you know, hey, we're just going to give up. You know, it's like, okay, I enjoyed that atmosphere because that's how my brain works, you know.
Yeah, Jerry Rogers said, we are not an advocate, but we do advocate.
Right, right. And we teach people to advocate for themselves as well and to kind of learn along the way. So, all right, see if I can figure out where I was here.
Sorry.
No, that's good. Again, part of this is, I'm probably not going to get through everything I have on here, which is okay, but I think part of it is just to be able to, you know, to normalize things that folks go through. But I will get to some of the interventions, I promise. So, again, some of the challenges we have to providing treatment, again, it's just when people are in cognitive and medical decline, you know, it is difficult, so sometimes you have to get a little more creative. Traumatic injuries and chronic medical conditions that prevent them from using coping skills they used to use. And so, you know, I always ask people, you know, I had a guy I was working with who was, you know, this is down at Tender Mercies, and so he's in his early 40s, and I said, you know, doesn't have a lot of coping skills because he used to just drink. You know, he drank a case of beer a day. Well, now that you can't drink, now you got to find some coping skills. So what did you used to do, you know, to help yourself when you're stressed? And he says, well, I used to be a pretty good break dancer. And so, and I just looked at him. He doesn't look like he could break dance effectively now. So it would make for a good YouTube moment, but I don't think that would do well either. So, you know, people can't necessarily do what they used to do, you know, so you have to be able to help them find some new things. So, again, lack of privacy, I think that's one of those things I talk to everybody about, you know, before we even start. And that will affect what people will tell you, you know, and what you're able to talk to them about. So limited options for positive activities or behavioral change. You know, when I work in the community, there's all kinds of options we have. Hey, how about this? You know, how about join this organization? Hey, you know, we can get you a membership at the Y, free membership. You know, when I have somebody who's, you know, a quadriplegic and they're in a nursing home, my options are very limited. You know, not only by their abilities, but also by what's available to them. So that's always going to be a problem. Communication challenges. People have hearing problems. I mentioned my guy, you know, that I was trying to work with, and you know, whereas we started out having very good conversations, you know, by the end of, you know, as his ears were getting worse, you know, we had very little communication. Couldn't write anything down. He couldn't see. You know, so, you know, I'm just basically coming in and patting him on the back and yelling in his ear who I am, you know, and just have a very brief conversation, you know, but that's all I could provide. You know, again, I'm not, at that point, I'm not necessarily providing counseling. You know, I'm just letting them know that somebody's there. So always the communication, hearing problems, speech problems. You got people who are unable to speak, and that makes it difficult to be able to help them. This one I put on there because inheriting previous counselors' boundary issues. And this isn't necessarily boundary issues, but I know, you know, if you ever get transfers or sometimes you come into a new facility, you know, or even I have people I see in the community and they'll tell me what their other counselor did. Well, my other counselor, you know, we used to do yoga together. It's like, well, I can't even touch my toes. I do not believe we'll be doing yoga together. You know, but then you've always got, well, this counselor, they would take me out to smoke. Well, we're not doing that. You know, I'm not going to buy you a soda, you know, and I think sometimes those things are appropriate, you know, but that's not what I do, you know. So I have to be able to do my thing, you know, and I have some people I've inherited that, you know, their counselors did wonderful things with them. And I couldn't do those wonderful things. I had less wonderful things that I was going to do, and it was unfortunate for the clients, you know. So sometimes it is, you know, it is difficult to come in behind somebody else because they're used to a certain relationship or they're used to something different. So, all right. Anything else before I move on?
Well, Velma Barber says about your breakdancing client. She says a former breakdancer could watch a video and explain what the moves are, how to learn them, and tell stories about it still.
That's possible, but I question his ever having the ability.
His veracity?
Oh, he believes he probably was a good breakdancer. However, I question it. But I think that's a good answer. Is that sometimes, you know, my knees recently went to the point where I can't run anymore, so I had to give up playing soccer. So I used to play a couple soccer games a week. You know, so when I go to a nursing home and one of you comes to visit me, please make sure you bring soccer videos, and we can talk about the game. And so, yeah, you can, if you're not able to physically do the things. You know, an example, I know some people do things like that, you know, to be able to watch videos and use some of the technology. And I think that's wonderful to be able to help people connect back to those things. And so one of the things I wish nursing homes would do, and I don't know why they didn't do it, if I was a social worker in a nursing home, I would have an iPad with FaceTime or Skype, and I would call up relatives, and I would let them have sessions where they could see and talk to people. That would be wonderful. That would be very simple. That would be unbelievable, and it would add quality to people's lives. I'm going to have to put that on my wish list. But I think doing things like that are very simple things, you know, that they, you know, I don't know any nursing homes I've ever worked on, and a lot of them are Wi-Fi connected right now. But it would put people in contact with, you know, with family members, and it would absolutely make a difference in their lives. So Moving on to my next slide. Now I have sort of in the middle before I move on, remember to take care of yourself. Okay, so I go through the list above of all the problems that we deal with in nursing homes. And so I don't do that just to complain or to point out that this is a difficult job. Part of the reason I pointed out is this is basically your given. So I do a lot of soccer coaching. And best example I can think of is, the kids will come off the field and say, hey, the referee's not calling anything. These guys are pushing us around, and the referee's not calling anything. And I look at them and go, you're right, the referee's not calling anything. Now what? Okay, now what? So they're playing rough. You guys are going to have to give it back a little bit. You know what you can get away with now? This is the parameters you have to work within. Coach, the field's terrible. I don't know how we expect us to play on this field. It's all bumpy. You can't do what we usually do. All right, you can't do what you usually do. So now what? You've got these parameters. You've got a different surface to work with. Now what? So in my coaching, the same as with my counseling, I'm going to give the person all of these things. Everybody else tells them not to complain. When they complain, I'll go right down with my clients and go, you know what, you're exactly right. It's horrible that those things happen. Now what? Because now you've got to deal with it. You can sit around here and stew all you want, but it's not going to make your life any better. It's not going to help you through this. How do you deal with these problems? Because this is what you're living with. This is the environment. Again, this is the forest we got to get out of, and it's very dark right now. So how are we going to start moving down this path to get you out of here? These are the givens, all right, and it is very lousy. But now we got a plan on how to get out of here. So that's the next step. So again, all of these challenges I look at, and I'll give all the clients that. I'll join with them in complaining because I'm not going to tell them it's not happening like everybody else.
So Maureen says, so a good question we might ask ourselves is, what are we doing that helps add quality to their life, if what we are doing helps add quality to their life?
Right. And again, the quality of life is a simple thing. So when we start to get into the interventions, I'll start to get in a little bit more to that. And what is it that this person needs? Because our interventions have to meet the person's needs. If you're providing interventions that are just, I have a lot of wonderful things I can do, but if they don't meet that person's needs, then they're not that wonderful. I can do all these, put nice words on, okay, I'm going to do Gestalt therapy with this person, but if that's not what is going to work with this person, then it's just me entertaining myself. And, I can entertain myself all different ways. I don't really need to go on my work hours and entertain myself. So remember to take care of yourself. Number one thing. Again, if I am miserable, I'm not going to be able to help anybody else. So the same thing. You have to be able to go into these areas and figure out how to deal with all these things you're seeing, because it is very toxic and it's very difficult. And so you have to make sure, what I usually tell the folks I work with, that have jobs and things like that, is that, develop rituals for yourself that remind you that you're no longer there. If you have a bad day at work, when I go home, I don't stay in my fancy clothes. I go ahead and I throw on my soccer shorts. I put on a nice, comfortable shirt. And I'm done. And so in my mind, I have to be done at the end of the day and find a way to do that. So I put down on here because again, I seem to have, when I was a kid, I'm not really a baby boomer, although I'm in a baby boomer generation by 3 days. I really don't fit that. There's a group that are sort of my generation who I call them the rerun generation. So, I came home from school when I was a kid, and I watched Gilligan's Island, I watched the Brady Bunch, I watched reruns of everything. And so you meet people from my slice of the generation, and you can quote the Brady Bunch, and you can remember cartoons. And things like that. And so these are the references I use because that's where I come from. So a number of years ago when I was doing case management, that was a very difficult job. And we were basically getting beat up and running around after people all day long. And I remember there was times when I would actually have nightmares. I had certain clients who would come to me in my dreams and would be banging on my door. And so it was certain point where I'm saying to myself, I cannot live like this. we have these clients coming and torturing me in my dreams. I've got to figure out a way to conceptualize it. So every once in a while I have a moment where a little light bulb goes over my head. And so it was the agency I was working with at the time had decided, because we had after-hour phone services, and there were a certain group of people who generally use these. So the agency decided what we really need to do is keep our, stay open later. And we have at one of the group homes, we had these drop-in areas. It was such a great idea because our clients needed this. And so we developed a service, and nobody used it. And I thought that was curious. And I thought to myself, I wonder why these people who need us don't need us during this time, because we know that they need us. And so all of a sudden I come up with my conceptualization. So there was a cartoon, and this was Bugs Bunny style Warner Brothers cartoon. And so in the cartoon, it was a sheepdog and a coyote. Okay, so the first scene is always they're coming in. They both have lunch boxes. They punch the clock. Morning Sam, morning Ralph. Sheepdog goes up on this little bluff. Then there's this little cave that the coyote goes down to. And they basically blow each other up, beat each other up. Then they usually show a little scene where they're eating lunch together. And then at the end of the day, the whistle blows, and the sheepdog's right about to hit the coyote. The whistle blows, and he puts the coyote down, dusts him off. The coyote's all black and blue, and they grab their lunch boxes, and they check back out, and they go, "See you tomorrow, Sam. See you tomorrow, Ralph." And so I realized that, that was really the work I was doing. I was getting beat up, not physically usually, but I was doing my job, and my clients were just doing their job. At the end of the day, they went back home. They were done, and I was done. And so even though I believed these people needed me all day, all the time, they really didn't. They came and did their thing. I did my thing. We both went back home and agreed to go do it all over again the next day. There were some people who really had other needs during the night, but just my general idea was, I can leave this behind, and then tomorrow, we'll take back up, and my clients will take back up as well, and we'll just have this little agreement. So once I came to that conceptualization, I slept much better at night, and just realized that this is kind of what we do. We do have to go through a lot on working in the nursing homes, but you've got to figure out, how to leave it behind. So the other thing that I always focus on is you have to understand that, I focus whether I did anything at the end of the day or not. With my counseling, was what I did effective? Was I able to add quality to people's lives? I always look at what my process was, because I cannot guarantee the outcomes. And the outcomes are not necessarily going to be what I want all the time. So I always have to look back, was I attentive? Did I do things that helped this person? Did I say the right thing at the right time? Did I offer some ideas? Did I encourage this person? Was I helpful to them, in some way? So always going back and looking at what was my process, because at the end of the day, that's how I judge whether I was successful. Because my folks are still going to be in the nursing home. A lot of them are dying. Okay, so the success is different. But did I do everything I could affect? Did I do the things I was supposed to do? And I walk out at the end of the day going, you know what? I did everything I could that day. And I'll think back, this person said that, this person did that. Okay, that was what I needed. So I don't worry about the outcome. If I do the right thing every time, I have a better chance of getting the outcomes I'm looking for. And so that's the way I look at it. So that's the last in my being able to take care of myself. So anything else there? All right. So the next thing I have here is challenges in diagnosing and planning treatment with residents. So this comes back to my conceptualization. Okay, so now I've been sent into the forest. This was actually then on a rescue mission. They actually want me to get the person out. I'm not just supposed to hit him over the head and bury him. All right. So a real rescue mission. So this is my assessment. So this is basically, I got to figure out, you know, where did this person come from? I got to figure out what resources they have. Where did these problems start? You know, how long have they been dealing with them? What have they tried before? What has worked? And then I have to look at what are their resources, you know, personally. Are they in a panic right now? Are they numb right now and don't really have any emotional attachment? You know, do they have family available? Do they have friends? You know, do they have coping skills, or have they lost all their coping skills? So is this going to be a carry where I got to carry them all the way out, you know, or am I going to be able to just offer a few, you know, suggestions and kind of teach them a few things and go, okay, the rest of the way is yours. That's basically my assessment, is to try to figure out, again, what is, you know, what do I have to deal with? So I always start with, and this is something that I recommend to everybody, I let my clients tell their story first. You know, there's a whole lot of answers I got to get, you know, but if I start asking the wrong questions first, then they're not going to want to talk to me. So I always start out with basically, how did you get here? The one story that they're most familiar with is how they got there. Okay, where were you living before that? What was life like before you came in here? Tell me your story, you know, and it's just basically just listening. So it gives me an opportunity to figure out, you know, what's going on. And like I said, this is the most available information for most of them. You know, they're telling me how they got there. And so you just listen and ask follow-up curiosity questions. I start out, you know, my assessment with a blank piece of paper, you know, and I just write on the blank piece of paper what they say, you know, and as much in their own words as possible. So I ask curiosity questions, and I have a conversation. And again, how do you add quality to people's lives? You know, one of the ways is by, you know, listening to their life. It adds significance. Like I said, when somebody passes away and nobody will talk about it, I think that demeans the person. So the aides don't generally want to listen. They don't really want to hear the story. The housekeepers are wonderful about that. Housekeepers will hang around. They will tell stories. They'll listen to stories. I love the housekeepers. If you want to know what's going on in almost any place, a lot of the older housekeepers especially are tremendous. And they're the people who will listen. You know, they're the less trained, the least trained, and the least qualified, and the best people, and the best listeners a lot of times. So, you know, again, we take on that and just give significance to the people's life by listening. You know, it's a very simple thing. You know, my second session, then I say, hey, you know what, I'm going to forget a lot of what you told me the first time, but I'm going to ask some very specific questions this time. You know, and I usually get into that the second time. If I have somebody that doesn't want to talk to me because, well, I don't know if I really want counseling, I don't know who told you I needed counseling, then I usually look around the room and I find a picture. Okay, you know, I see a picture of a guy over there who's got a, you know, uniform on. Looks like World War II or something. Was that your husband? You know, who was that? And then I just engage him in conversation and let him talk. And so we talk for a half hour, and I say, you know, hey, this was counseling. This is basically, you know, what we would do, you know. And so they look at you and go, okay, well, I could probably do that. You know, I'm lonely. I could use somebody to talk to. Okay. And so sometimes you have to engage people even if they're resistant. And you do by just, you know, again, nobody wants to hear their story. So that's what we do. We listen. You know, we allow them to give significance to that. So I put on here, with older clients, do some porch sitting. Now, porch sitting is a very simple notion. Now, you don't necessarily even have to be talking when you're porch sitting. So you sit out somewhere outside and you just watch things, and you don't sit across from the person. You sit next to them and you're looking out at something, and then you make comments. You know, they might make a comment, you might make a comment, and you just share some time. Older guys especially enjoy porch sitting. And it's a very simple thing, and what you find is it's very non-threatening as well. All of a sudden they'll start talking about something, you know, and they're telling stories. And so, you know, the other part of that is that you should be willing to share a story. You know, if somebody's telling you a story, they would like to hear a story as well. And so be willing to share a story, not something irrelevant. But although, you know, I told a story. I had a woman that I just started seeing her, and she was very depressed. You know, she was just had gone through a whole lot of just awful stuff. And, you know, she had been doing a lot of talking. And, you know, we were just talking about the new year. And, you know, I just said to her, I said, you know what, I got a new hobby this year. She looked at me and goes, okay. You know, I said, I decided I'm taking up sausage making. And she looks at me and goes, what? And she just gets this big smile on her face, and I go, swear to God, my wife thinks I'm absolutely crazy. And so all of a sudden, these big packages, these big heavy packages start coming in the mail. And first thing I realized is that things are bigger than they look like from Amazon.com. And so a sausage stuffer is actually a lot larger in real life and a lot heavier. And so, yeah, and so I basically told her that story. And I've met with her 3 or 4 times, and she was just laughing. You know, this is probably the first time she laughed in I don't know how long. She'd been homeless. She had been in the hospital. She had this and that, and back in the hospital. And I told her, which was relatively, you know, I thought a funny story. It was what was on my mind, and she thought it was hilarious. And so I think it's kind of funny too. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but you know, you have to be willing to share a story. It allows them also. For a lot of people, they're very prideful, not in a bad way. They're very proud people, and they know that we're doing for them, and they have nothing to offer us. You know, for the most part, they're in a nursing home. They have nothing, and so what they can offer sometimes is a piece of advice. You know. And that will really make their day. You know, they can share a laugh. They can listen to us, and they want to listen to us. It gives them an opportunity to give back to us, because this is what we're giving. We're giving them patience. We're giving them an ear. We're giving them some attention. You know, when you allow them that opportunity as well, you'd be amazed at how they respond to that. You know, and then they also feel like, you know, and again, I don't do this the whole session usually. You know, I start out every session with a little chit-chat. You know, and then we get down to business, and they understand when my tone changes. Now we're in the business end, and then at the end, you know, we kind of sum everything up, and then we chit chat a little bit more. And it's a business. In the middle, we do business, and once we set that up, you know, again, they like to be able to do that. That is adding quality to their life, to be able to provide something for us. You know, even, you know, a little craft. I had a woman who used to, every time I came in, you know, gave me some drawings or artwork or something like that, and she loved doing that. And I, you know, even after she passed away, I had a whole stack of her stuff, you know, that I kept for a couple years, you know, because that was what she had to offer me. So, I'm
going to add something real quick, right. Tom. Jerry Rogers says that he loves porch sitting, especially when they're on the real porch. It does wonders for his clients. Angie Swearingen is wondering, have you explicitly told your clients that that's the format to your sessions, or is it just something they come to know through experience?
I think they come to know through experience. You know, so I never say, hey, we're going to chit chat. You know, but when I have somebody that I see in the office, in my palatial office, when I come to my office, you know, when people first come in, we have certain things that we touch on. You know, I have a guy that I've been seeing for a while who, you know, took up watching, I think just to make me happy, took up watching English soccer. You know, so I'm a big Liverpool fan. He became a Chelsea fan. And so, you know, he's had the better of me a little bit lately, which is unfortunate. However, you know, we end the session. We deal with everything. His mom is basically gone into a nursing home, and so we will have, you know, our business end, and then at the end, we know that we lighten it back up. You know, because again, you know, we drop them down into a very dark place sometimes, you know, and I don't want to leave them there. So part of my lightening things up at the end is allowing them to back out of this, you know, and it's a very simple thing. You know, I don't do it, you know, hey, you know, let's lighten up, because you're making me really bringing me down.
Angie said she was wondering about the structure because sometimes she gets the talker and it's hard to get them down to business later.
Right. and that's when you just kind of, you ask the question and change the subject, you know, and once again, a lot of it is just, I know I change my tone, and once I change my tone and I revisit last session, or, you know, hey, I know we've been working on this, that they understand that change, and most of them are good about getting back on. So I'm not even sure if I'm in the, I may be on the wrong page even. So I'm just going to keep going and act like I'm on the right page here. So yeah, I think I did actually. Yeah, so I'm on page 3, I believe. I think I really just kind of skipped over page 2. So I was wondering, because as I was doing my intro about Lawson Forest, it didn't match what I was looking at paper. So all right, so I'm going to finish this segment and I'm going to go back. One of the things to understand, and this is, you know, aside from porch sitting, the next one, and we are on page 3, be aware that men and women have different needs. This shouldn't seem earth-shattering. However, it's one of those things that you do have to understand. And one of the ways that when we talk about interventions for men and the interventions you may use with women, a lot of times are going to be different. So the best way I can put it is, you know, I'm going to let you in on some of the men's secrets here. So men, the term I use is tribal. Men tend to be more tribal, which means, you know, if I go to a soccer field, I'm going to know somebody there. They're going to know who I am. They're going to call me Tommy, right? And so it's a joke with Stephanie. And they know where I fit in. I know where I fit in, and that's where my comfort level is. Now, I got a friend through church that was kind of a friend of my wife's who, you know, goes on Saturday mornings to this, you know, coffee and cars or whatever. These guys who have these hot rods get together and have breakfast, and, you know, and he always says, hey, why don't you come along, you know? And my wife's always, oh, you know, you should go with Jim sometime there. And I'm like, no. Doesn't that sound like that'd be fun? No, because I am not a car guy. You know, I am just not a car guy. That is not my tribe. If you put me in a nursing home and there's nobody from my tribe there, I have no reason to talk to anybody. I swear to God, I'm a relatively social person, but I don't need a new tribe, you know. I come from the larger tribe of the guys, so the guy tribe is the bigger tribe. Now, if I'm a guy, so you'll hear people say, hey, you know what, he's a good guy. You know, what does that mean? What does it mean he's a good guy? Because you know, women might sit around and go, he does horrible things. You know? No, he's a good guy. Now, what does that mean to be a good guy? A good guy. Now, you understand that men's communication is competitive. Okay? If you see a bunch of boys together, the most popular boys talk louder, faster, are wittier. You got to be able to give it out as much as you can take it. Okay? So when you're kids, these guys all get together. Guys. Those are the guys who are bantering back and forth. They're yelling over top of one another. It's absolute chaos. That's how guys communicate. So even as we get older, we continue that. So if I'm with a bunch of guys, you know, if you ever saw the show Rescue Me, which was a Dennis Leary show, those were guys. You know, if you watch it, you're going, God, this is terrible. These guys are inappropriate. How can they say those things? And I'm sitting there going, yeah, those are guys. That's what they do. So when you say a guy's a good guy, he knows how to talk fast. He knows how to tell a story. He knows how to one-up your story. You know, he knows how to give it to you, and you better be able to give it back. So part of being able to, guys like to hear stories, you know, and so that's part of the guys. Now, people who develop anxiety disorders and especially a lot of personality disorders, they don't fit into the tribe of guys, and they understand they don't fit into the tribe of guys. And so when you have somebody who's antisocial or borderline in a nursing home, they know they don't fit because they're not a guy. No one is ever going to say, yeah, he's a good guy, okay, because they don't fit, and they know they don't fit, okay? Yes, has nothing to do with his behavior. He talks fast and loud. He can, He can tell a story. He can tell a story. You can poke at him, and he also understands the rules. You know, one of the rules is you don't make fun of another guy's wife. That's a rule. If you do, everybody's gonna come down on you. So, you know, you don't. And if a guy's been with a girlfriend for a long time, you don't criticize that either. Now, if it's a new girlfriend, she's fair game. All right, in a big way. She's not in. She's not in. So, but wives are part of the tribe. You know, they're well accepted. You do not make a comment about a guy's wife. That would be absolutely out of bounds. If he does, then you laugh along with it. Right? Am I going wrong here? He won't step in that. So, but that's what you have to understand. So when you're suggesting to your guys, you know, hey, why don't you go? You know, there's some other guys who are down the hall. Why don't you go talk with them? No, I don't really need that. I don't really need to socialize. And a lot of the guys also, you know, we have an activities director in our house, and it's my wife. And I come home from work on Friday and say, what's going on this weekend? And she'll tell me, okay? And I'll say, that sounds good. All right. Can't we do something with my tribe once in a while? You know, because we keep hanging out with your tribe, and I can talk with those guys, but no. Okay? So the other thing about men is men have a tendency to be problem solvers. Okay, this is our wheelhouse. And so when you're in a nursing home, there are no problems to be solved. Okay, so activities they're about spending time and socializing and doing crafts. It's not about solving problems. So a lot of guys, you know, if they're doing construction in the place or the maintenance guy's working on something, there's going to be a couple old guys there saying, what are you using that wrench for? You know, you should do this. So even when you're telling stories to a guy, you know, sometimes telling him about what's, you know, hey, you won't believe the plumbing in our house is just an absolute mess. Boom, all of a sudden, I have got a guy who's going to tell me exactly what I should be doing, even if he's wrong. He will still tell me. That's what a guy wants to hear, okay? And so, again, working with men, that's going to be different. And that's why men and women have communication problems sometimes. So, again, so as you start to look at interventions for men, you have to understand, number one, figure out what tribe they're from. There might be somebody from that same tribe. This is what VFW halls were for. Okay, VFW halls and men's groups that is your tribe. I mean, I've got a number of tribes that I hang out with. At my high school, you know, I went to the sports stag last Thursday. You know, man, I was with my tribe there. You know, saw everybody I knew. You know, I loved it. You know, that was where I'm comfortable. Like I said, put me in a nursing home with a bunch of people randomly, I'm not going to hang out with those guys at all. I want nothing to do with them. You know, but if you can find out what tribe they belong to, you know, is it, you know, some of the guys were, you know, they were a church guy, you know, and so, well, there might be some guys there that can do a Bible study with them, and that is their group, you know, so you do have to figure that out. So just be aware of that a lot of the activities in that are not necessarily geared towards what men would be looking for. So, all right. Okay. I'm still on page 3, and I've got way too much. This is a 4-hour. I have 4 hours to fill, right?
Well, we have a question, Tom. Okay. Jerry Rogers would like to know, so when is your next seminar for the ladies of TCS to discuss some spots and tool topics to help them with the men in their lives?
Ah, okay. Well, I'll give you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry, for looking out for us.
I'll give you the best piece of advice. This is the best piece of advice I give to my women clients. All right. So one of the communication issues that a lot of people have, again, men as problem solvers. When you start talking to a man, they register problem. Okay? And so if there's a problem, then they start offering solutions. Now, this is another one of those moments where, you know, I one time had a light go off above my head. So my wife comes home from work. She's a school teacher. She has a 7th grader who's having, you know, emotional problems. She has an eating disorder. She started cutting on herself. This is my wheelhouse. I am from the counselor and social worker tribe, after all. And so I start to offer her, here's what you can do, do this and do that. And she looks at me and says, I don't need your advice. I've got all these other people working on it. Okay. All of a sudden the light bulb went on. She just really wanted to vent. She just wanted to talk. Okay. You have to understand, I don't call any of my friends. Do not call my friends. I don't. Every once in a while, if there's something funny, I'll text a friend. But it's usually to set up a time when we're going to get together. Okay? The only reason a friend calls me is because somebody died, or their parents died, and we have to go to a funeral, or they need help with something. Okay? The plumbing in their house. Hey, I need this tool. You got that? Yeah. You want me to drop it over? Okay. Right. So one of the things I suggest to my female clients is, before you start talking, sometimes preface by saying, this is not a problem, I don't need it solved, I just need you to listen. And I have my female clients coming back and going, that worked. I'm so surprised. And it's like, okay, well, I just let you in on one of the secrets. So again, even that sometimes, when your female clients say, why does that guy have to keep telling that same story over and over again? It's because he can. Because his guy friends would understand that when I get together with my buddies every month, we retell the same stories all the time, partly because our wives don't want to hear those stories anymore. But we will enjoy always telling the same stories. So if you have an old guy client and he wants to relive an older guy, his most significant point in his life is when he was younger. Okay? So when he wants to talk about when he was back in the Army, when he wants to talk about when he was vital, when he was a man, let him talk about that. It's not just, he just always wants to talk about the past. That's when he was at his best. So he always wants to remember that. So sometimes you have to just let him tell that story one more time and laugh along with him, because that's what the guys would do. So that is not dementia. It is. Oh. No, it's called being a guy. It's not actually dementia. It's hard to tell the difference. It is. I'm always going to remember, and that's with my buddies. I get together with my buddies every month, and I say, we got to keep doing this because nobody else is going to remember how great we were, except us.
I do think that there's a certain level of gender issue there, because I use the porch sitting a lot. I fixed my plumbing under my sink over Christmas about 50 times in the last 2 weeks because I've talked about it with many of my clients. But I think that sometimes men just want to be heard. And there are a lot of women that solve problems.
Yeah.
That's all.
And I think there are, tremendously, I have a number of my clients who I make that point to. Actually, I had that conversation with one of my clients this morning. She's a problem solver, and so she has a tendency to be more comfortable around men. In fact, she'll, sometimes I'll ask that question: are you more comfortable around men, or are you more comfortable around women? And for my client that I met with this morning, she's more comfortable around guys, and she has difficulty, communicating sometimes with women. Because she talks over people. She talks very fast. So, again, I spent a little bit more time than I expected on that. Were there any other?
We know what your next CE topic will be now, Tom. Maybe we'll have one on gendered communication, but I think it needs to be co-hosted by a male and a female.
Yeah, but it is when you understand that men have different needs, because there's not a lot of men in the nursing homes necessarily, so they're not. It's
Stand here. I think men and women like to tell stories about their tribe, and they like to be acknowledged for the tribes that they were in and have the experience of having, somebody from the outside be like, validate them, be
Right.
fascinated with that. That's interesting. Tell me about how you slaughtered an entire pig and how you used every piece of it.
Right.
I want to hear it.
You hit on another one of my topics, and I think especially with older women a lot of times like to talk about their kids, and they will give you an update every week on everybody in the family. And I don't sit there and go, you know what, you told me about that last week. I know, I will listen because that's where they find significance. So again, we come back to the whole quality of life. How do you provide quality to somebody's life? You provide significance by listening, to what's interesting to them.
There are so many.
No, you do not. You really, really do not. I'm not just saying it's sorry.
There are so many things that we all are doing that are so wonderful and are coming naturally, and it doesn't feel like counseling.
Right.
And I work in different nursing homes than you do. All of my people are old, and my youngest is 74, and my
Wow.
oldest is in her 90s. And as far as self-disclosure, with people of that generation, the correct thing to do is, how are you? And then, how are you? And then, how is your family? And it's only polite to, you don't have to, but to say that you're interested, that you respect them, it puts you on a level footing, and they expect you to show caring in that way. It's stuff that's hard to teach if it doesn't come naturally to you. But the folks, and the older folks especially, they need that, they appreciate it, and no one else, except the housekeeper. And I agree with they know everything. And it is such a treat. I'm really enjoying this talk. You are masterful. You are a remarkable case manager. And you have turned into now a remarkable teacher.
Thank you.
And this, whether we get through the paper, doesn't matter. You know that.
Right.
This is an ongoing discussion. You're giving us all permission to be human beings. And one of the remarks, this is pretty typical outfit that I'd wear to work, and nothing fancy. And I've had a couple ladies tell me, I'm so glad you don't dress up, because I never get to wear my old clothes, or my good clothes, and I'd be uncomfortable if you came in here all dressed up. And I knew that before I came to this. I don't dress up anymore. Those days are long behind me. But it's a remarkable nonverbal thing to be able to read the person.
Right, and I think one of the things, and kind of adding on to that, I mentioned that I do a lot of soccer coaching. So almost every day, in the winter I'm only a couple days a week. So almost every day I go from work to soccer, and so this is sort of kind of how I distract myself. But when I work with younger kids, so last night I had a session with 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, and so I had to have a big picture. What am I trying to teach these kids? And so that is my big picture. I'm trying to teach them we had to teach them how to properly pass the ball, which they're not actually going to be able to use, which is not important right now, but I'm teaching them the proper technique. However, I taught them in a game. I had 2 games that are just absolutely, the funnest games I played that taught the proper thing. So they didn't even understand that they were being taught anything. We go for an hour and 15 minutes, and they're like, what do you mean we're done? You know, this is like an hour and 15 minutes of them running around, and they're like, shouldn't we be, you know, shouldn't we have more? And it's like, okay, well, I did my thing. So a lot of times with counseling, especially with older adults, you know, I don't want them to feel like I'm counseling them, but it is. And so it is what you carry, sort of like what Lonnie's talking about is, you know, how you ask the questions. You sort of open it up. You have the big picture of what you want this person to believe, what they need to do. That is the big picture. And in the nursing homes, progress is glacial. It is not going to happen quickly. And so we do this over a slow process. I know that I'm going to keep trying to move them without them knowing they're being moved. And that's part of the if you do this correctly, you know, over time they'll let you in, and you are going to teach them those things. It's your relationship with them. So one of the first things that I, you know, work with everybody, the number one tool we have is our relationship. So you spend time developing the relationship. I mean, the first few times I meet with somebody, you know, we're in the nursing homes. When I have somebody in the office, I don't know, I assume that they're not going to be back too many times. But if I have somebody in the nursing homes, it's really just relationship building. You know, we do a lot of porch sitting. We do a lot of, you know, telling stories so that they can start to get into the process. Once they, you know, like I said, with my coaching, if I have kids who believe this is the funnest thing ever, well, they're going to play more soccer. And that's what I want them to do, because that's when they're going to get better. So if they're able to tell stories and share and all these things, then we're going to be able to get down to business eventually, but it may take a little bit of time, you know. And so, you know, I miss working with the older folks. That was, you know, I love stories. I love people telling stories because I love telling stories. You know, when I was a kid, I come from a good Irish Catholic background. So when we go out to the Jersey Shore, you know, and hang out there, you know, you just sit around and tell stories, you know, and everybody talks really fast, and it's just everybody laughs, and that's just kind of how it goes. And that's, you know, again, if you enjoy that, then that's what I engage my clients in. You know, that is part of my counseling process. So as far as interventions, that's the big picture intervention. Develop a relationship and make the people significant. So I'm going to talk about, and you're right, this is about more than just covering this information, but somebody's out there going, I wanted to really talk about, you know, some of these interventions. So I'll talk just very briefly about as far as the assessment. Again, one of the problems with doing the assessments in nursing homes is you're not necessarily looking at the person as they were. You're looking at the person as they are now. And so I have a woman who I've worked with for a couple years who has an anoxic brain injury from a heroin overdose. Now, when I was able to get through her history, she is a raving personality disorder. She had a chaotic life. You know, she is paralyzed now. She can't read because of her brain damage. And I can talk with her for about 5 minutes, and then she gets kind of fatigued, and it's like then talking to, you know, somebody whose language I can't, it's just mumbles. It just keeps, and I have to try to not keep asking her to repeat herself, you know, and it's a very difficult thing. Now, the things that she needs to work on and who she used to be are very different than who she is now. So as I'm doing my assessment, trying to figure out what she needs, you know, it can be very difficult. Gathering information can be difficult because of memory issues, because of communication problems. So sometimes you have to try to figure out how to get the information. Sometimes you can find things in the chart that people aren't necessarily going to tell you in person. Sometimes people can't remember things. You know, sometimes, again, I got to figure out if this person has a delirium because they have a UTI, you know, or they really have dementia. You know, I have a guy that I have been working with who I was pretty sure had some type of an alcohol dementia. And then this week I had a conversation with him. And I was absolutely floored because this was not the guy that I had talked to 3 weeks ago. You know, all of a sudden, you know, he's starting to get a little bit of clarity. And I was completely surprised by that. I had to all of a sudden, you know, realize that I had to work on some different things. You know, before I was just kind of going, you know, this guy's not going to get to, he just had one of his legs removed. you know, his second leg removed. And he just kept looking at me going, this is really deep, man. This is deep. Okay, well, I'm not sure I can work with that. But this past session, we started to talk about loss and grief and about what it was like to not be who he used to be, and how is he going to find this new life. And so, you know, so you don't always start with all the information you need. And so again, as I find this person in the forest, you know, we have to start moving. You know, standing still for too long is really not going to be the answer. You know, I may have to put this person on my back and walk for a little while before they say, hey, you know what, I can start to feel my legs again. Why don't you set me down and we'll start walking together. Okay, so sometimes as I start taking the path, things are a little bit different. And again, in a nursing home, information is, and especially with the charts as they are these days, there's not as much information as there used to be. So strategies for finding that information, you know, doing a chart review, you can just, by with medicine somebody's on, it'll tell you whether they have a mental health history. If I see somebody who's on the medication Clozaril, I know that they're a long-term schizophrenic and they've been on at least 2 medications that didn't work in the past before they meet the criteria for being on that medicine. So even though their symptoms may be controlled, I know, you know, that tells me that this is not necessarily, this is the person doing well versus, you know, how things may have been. Sometimes when you're talking to people, you know, even just stop and ask orientation questions. And that fellow that I had the conversation with this time, this week, you know, when he kept saying this was deep, man, I said, hey, do you know what day it is? Nope. You know, do you know what month it is? September. Okay. Do you know what year we're in? Nope. Okay. Just very simple, and I didn't do it in a demeaning way, but I just kind of stopped and go, well, I'm starting to see a little bit of something. Let me just, a couple of simple questions. This week he could have answered those questions, you know, so something changed in him. He's a young guy. He's really not that old. He's like my age, so he's a young guy. So, yeah.
No, I belong to their club. I don't want to be kept out.
Yeah, and my clients want me to dress up. You know, when I go into the older ladies, they want me. They look me up and down and go, I like that tie. And so I don't have the tie on now, but you know, again, it's different. You know, but they liked. You know, some of the nursing homes when I go into Lincoln Crawford, you know, all the women look me up and down and comment on oh, I like that, you know, and right. And so I, yeah, I'll get hat head. All right, so one of the strategies, just briefly, strategies to overcome some of the challenges. One of the things, I'm still on page would be page 2. I don't have page numbers. I went back to page 2. So I'm on 3, you know, page 2, number 3. All right. So one of the issues, and this is one of the things, when we used to do dementia testing on everybody, a lot of times you had somebody, the referral is, we think this person's depressed because they're no longer doing their ADLs and they've stopped going to activities. And so you go in and you start talking with this person and they don't seem depressed at all. You know, they seem very cheerful. And so one of the issues is always, is this a problem with initiation or is this a problem with depression? And so initiation, there's a part of your brain, and I'm not going to get too technical, there's a part of your brain that helps you start things, and there's a part of the brain that helps stop things. You know, if you're not good, if the part of your brain that starts things is not working properly, you know, because of cognitive decline, dementia, then you aren't able to start things. Okay, so, you know, you aren't going out to activities because your brain didn't send the signal to the rest of the body, let's get up and go. You know, if the activities people come in and say, hey, would you like to go to bingo, they're up and they go. Same thing, you know, even starting their ADL. So I'll have to say, you know what, this person's starting to have some dementia. This is really not depression. So you may have to actually suggest to them that they do the next thing. You know, sometimes as dementia increases also, people sometimes they can't do two-step directions. So you have to tell the aides, you know, when you say, hey, why don't you go brush your teeth, wash your face, go to the bathroom, and then come back here, you know, they'll brush their teeth. And then they'll be standing there. And you'll say, why didn't you do those other things? And then they'll get frustrated with them. And so it's like, well, that's where they're, you know, one of the ways to find that out is asking them to make lists of things. So in the dementia rating scale, one of the questions was, you know, can you name things that you might find or buy in a supermarket? Find or buy in a supermarket. Sometimes I'll ask people, can you name fruits? Can you name some fruits for me? If somebody has trouble with initiation, they'll go, fruits, apple, orange, apple, done. Okay, that's telling me, okay, this person is starting to show some signs of dementia. So again, that's a very subtle thing, and it's a very simple thing to ask, hey, staff, be aware of this, because this person will need to. You know, when they start to say, I shouldn't have to. Well, yes, you are going to have to. You know, you're going to have to ask them to do the next step.
Do you have any suggestions on like articles or resources about that kind of stuff, about initiation and measuring that with our clients?
Well, like I said, we used to, in the old days, we used to do the dementia rating scale, you know, so they can go online and try to find tests for dementia, but it's basically a lot of times just asking them to list things. That's a very simple way. You know, can you list this? One of the others was, you know, look at the things that I'm wearing. How many things that I'm wearing can you name? And they'll say you have a shirt on, vest, and that's it. You know, how about these? Okay, those are pants. Okay, so sometimes you'll ask, you know, also, can you name this? What is that? And so if sometimes they're starting to have trouble recalling or coming up with names again. This is a whole nother, we're getting into the neurocognitive stuff, but just a very simple thing. Perseveration is the opposite of initiation. Perseveration is the repeating of things. You know, so that's different than an old guy who wants to tell about the championship over and over again. That guy's fine. Now, especially when he's with his buddies. So you have to allow him license to do that. So perseveration is the getting stuck. And so this is another thing, and I don't even know where it's on here. One of the things, this is a very simple intervention that I actually felt guilty about doing when I first started doing it. So I've got, a lot of times you'll get a referral on someone who's perseverating. And they'll be perseverating going, my family doesn't care about me, my family doesn't love me anymore, no one comes to visit me. And so you try to talk them through that, well, I see, you know, I know your son comes every week, you know, and then they, you know, then they start crying again and going, my family doesn't visit me, nobody cares about me, nobody loves me anymore. And so that's their brain getting stuck, you know, so they're not able to move to the next topic. And when they have a thought like that, a negative thought, a lot of times it brings the emotions with them. And so again, I get this referral on somebody who obviously has dementia, and they're perseverating, and I keep trying, you know, my first inclination used to be, well, if I can only explain it in a different way. But they're not able to process it in a different way. They're not able to reconceptualize this. You know, so what I started doing was, you know, and I call it basically the Jedi mind trick. Okay, basically it sounds bad, but I will repeat to them, I will come up with a positive statement that counters. You know, so I'll say something along the line of, I know your family loves you, they visit you all the time, and you've had a wonderful life. And so they start crying, and I'll repeat the same 2 or 3 simple sentences. I'll say, your family loves you, they visit you all the time, and you've had a wonderful life. And so, and I'll tell the staff to do the same thing. And the next time I come in to visit them, I'll say, well, how you doing? Their mood is much better. Now they're not crying. And I'll say, well, how have you been? You know what? My family comes to visit me all the time. I've had a wonderful life. And it's not, it basically, if they're going to get stuck on something, their brain is perseverating. They are stuck. Okay, well, why allow them to be stuck on something negative when I can get them, and I'm not lying to them, I'm actually saying what's truthful. And so, but now all of a sudden, amazingly, the amazing thing is that the emotions follow the statement somehow. So they're saying this thing, and all of a sudden it has a positive emotion attached to it. Now, the person, all of a sudden, I don't have to work with them anymore because they're no longer crying, they're no longer depressed. What they weren't really depressed necessarily before, it was really the perseveration. So just a very simple intervention. So
Velma Barber says the Montreal Cognitive Assessment is online, and it's also very simple to use as a measure like the dementia rating scale.
yeah, and again, if you want to check for and problems with initiation, one of my other favorites is I know somebody had done a presentation, I don't remember her name, a couple weeks ago, months ago, the geriatric depression scale, and the full version, which is the 30 questions. If I have somebody where I'm not sure whether they're having problems with initiation or if it's really depression, I will ask those questions. Even the best person, I use the full 30 questions because even the person who's trying to give me positive answers, I wear them down after a while. About 10 questions in, they're just answering honestly. And, you know, if I have somebody who answers, you know, without any depressive symptoms, and they're not, and it's more of a problem with initiation, then this isn't depression. This is a problem with initiation. So geriatric depression scale recommended. I still do it with a lot of my nursing home clients, especially the older ones. It can sort out some additional symptoms, especially hopelessness and not feeling worthwhile. There's one question on there, you know, I feel worthless the way I am now. And that's a really difficult question. And I've had people who just break into tears. They were trying the best they could, and all of a sudden, you know, you ask them, you know, I feel pretty worthless the way I am now, and all of a sudden, they just break down, and then they start talking. So, do recommend that. So, just very quickly, because I've run out of time, a lot of just in a general sense, you know, adjustment disorders, and this comes back to my larger conceptualization. How good a believer is this person? You know, so if I have somebody who has an adjustment disorder, I'm doing grief counseling. Okay, this person had a loss. That loss is their carefree life. You know, and I came to this again, another light bulb. You know, I was diagnosed when I was 31. I was diagnosed diabetic, and so my conceptualization was I had to figure out how to live a new life. You know, I went through, you know, why me and all that kind of stuff. And then, again, I get to the point where, okay, you know, I got to do this, so let's do this. But I realized it was, you know, hey, wow, that was a grief process I just had to come through. And so the acceptance is the point at which you can say, I have a new life, how am I going to live it? And so that's when I have, again, the woman I told the story about making sausage, you know, it was an adjustment disorder. She's not had problems with depression in the past. You know, and so we had to work on, when I finally put it to her that way, I said, you know what, you're really going through a grief process here. You know, your life as you know it is gone. You cannot go back. You know, the acceptance of the grief process is realizing whether it's loss of a person, loss of your independence, loss of your functioning, is that you cannot go back to your old life. Okay, so if we cannot go back, how do I go forward? And so that's really the counseling that happens there. And so, you know, I mentioned also here, you know, the family rescue fantasy. This is another thing. And so this you've seen before, but you've never really, you haven't called it this. So we get a referral on a client. They could probably get out of the nursing home if they did their rehabilitation. You know, all they got to do is they got to learn how to walk, and it's going to be very difficult, but they could do it. And they're not doing it. They're not doing the physical therapy. And so, you know, you get the referral. You know, I got to put this person on my back and figure out the way out of the forest here. And so you start to listen to them. And I say, well, what's your plan here? Well, I have a nephew. I had this woman. This is the first time I realized this. I have this woman. She's like 80 years old. She can't walk. She's in a wheelchair. You know, she's incontinent. And she's going to go live with her 19-year-old grandson who's in college. Okay. And so she's so sure of that. That's why she's not doing her physical therapy anymore. Okay, and she's going to hang on to that. So I started to realize that I had some other folks who were going through the same thing. So basically, they don't do what they have to do. They already know the people who will not take them. So it's usually not somebody, it's not their kids, because their kids have said, you know what, Mom, you got to stay here. You know, we can't care for you. So they've got this person. I know I can stay with my cousin. You know, I know I can't walk, and he lives in this building that has 52 stairs, but I'm sure he can carry me up and down when I need to go somewhere. And you're kind of going, wow. You know, it's not really delusional. You know, it's basically a fantasy, and they want to hang on to that thing that keeps them from making them do their work. And so how do I conceptualize, what do I do with this person? Again, this is buying a lottery ticket and deciding that you're going to quit your job because you're so sure this is the time I'm going to win. All right? That's what it is. And so I'll say that to people. Well, you know, let's say that your grandson who's 19 and in college, who probably is really looking forward to having his 80-year-old grandmother stay with them. I'm sure he would like that as you have as a roommate. But if that doesn't work, what's your plan B? Let's come up with a plan B. So, you know, if you don't win the lottery, maybe, you know, let's keep the job for now. You know, what is it going to take? And so it's just another one of those little things that sometimes you see. And if you work in long-term care long enough, you will have those people. And if you really listen to it, and you just, I'll sometimes, when people don't do their physical therapy, I'll ask them, you know, have you ever thought who you could go live with? You know, and they'll say, yeah, my cousin. I've thought about that a lot. They have that person in their back pocket that they believe that they can go live with. If you ask them that direct question, they'll tell you because they've thought through that. And that's why they quit their physical therapy, because family will take you as you are. Okay? So that's why it's always family, based on the fact family will take me as I am. You know, so this cousin of mine I haven't talked to for 5 years, I'm sure that I can go live there. And so, again, adjustment disorders, what you're talking about is basically it's a grief process you're helping that person work through. And, you know, again, what do we add as far as quality of life? Again, they can regain their own quality of life. So these are the people who, you know, functioning relatively well. You know, they're not way down on the non-believer scale. You know, they're able to believe enough, but they're going to have to see some things. They've got to reconceptualize things, think about them differently, see some progress. They already have coping skills. They're just been disconnected. So it's what have you been able to do before that worked? It's more of a brief counseling and help them reconnect to that. So instead of me having to carry this person out of the forest, now I'm basically, and here's what to look for. Here's what you can do. Here's some of the skills. You okay? And then they're, you know, by the time they get out, they're ready to make it on their own. So that's a lot of the folks we work with. Now, the SMD clients, these are the, I have moved on. I'm not sure what page it's even. So, page 4. I'm now working with the mentally. I've reached the halfway point. So, but this is sad. I was talking with Lonnie Everline. Just in case anybody didn't know. If I just say Lonnie, I'm sure everybody would know. She's part of the tribe. I just have to say Lonnie. Everybody knows where she fits in, right? It is. So I don't even need to, I don't know. So Lonnie and I were talking about, this is one of the populations that when I first started working in long-term care, there were not mental health clients in nursing homes. It was just not happening. I did not see a guardian until I started working in long-term care. It was just not done for mental health clients. We believed they had the right to be out in the community and that we would do whatever it took for them to be out in the community because we believed in that mission. Now, this is sort of how the pendulum swings. So the pendulum has swung the other way. They've decided that that was a bad idea. They're rounding these folks up, putting them into the nursing homes. Now, once someone goes into a nursing home, if they had had case management, state of Ohio changed the Medicaid rules a few years ago. They will not pay for case management for somebody in a nursing home. Now, there was no Dave to bring that against the state. It just happened. So somebody goes into a nursing home and they say, you know what, my case manager hasn't been in 3 weeks, you know, because your case management didn't have the guts to tell you that they're not going to be able to provide services and they are going to disconnect with you. And then that person, again, is going to be there. You know, there is no plan. You know, in the old days, you went into the hospital, there was a plan for you to get out. You know, you played off by the rules, you did these things. And so the unfortunate thing is, you know, we talk about hope and quality of life. A lot of these folks end up very hopeless. And so why not retreat back into my delusional world where I am important? You know, hey, I'm, you know, the son of Geo, you know, in my world. So why don't I go to that world? Why do I want to play bingo? You know, I don't really need to interact with people. And so part of our adding quality to these folks' lives is having normal conversations with them. You know, work on stress management. Being psychotic is very stressful. The more stressed you are, the more psychotic you're going to be. So the first thing I work with on most of my mental health clients is stress management. So it's like, this person is really, really crazy. What am I supposed to do? Work on stress management. Find some things they can do that help distract them from listening to their thoughts. Try to, a little bit at a time, even if it's for an hour a week, try to have a normal conversation with them. You know, ask them about things they used to like to do. Ask them about music. Ask them about art. You know, engage them in the real world. Try to see if they'd be willing to come back. You know, we don't have a whole lot of how to offer. Their real world does not provide a lot of hope. There's really not a lot to offer. Come back here to this nursing home. You're going to be here for the next 25 years. It's wonderful. I know that you have this important, you know, you wrote those books to the president and you're supposed to get all this money, but really come back into the nursing home. This is all this and more. And so it is a shame, and it's one of the things that bothers me the most. So developmental disabilities, you know, working with clients, I believe this is sort of the next wave of folks that we're going to start to see in the nursing homes because of changes in the mental health, in the MRDD, DDS system. There are a lot that have health problems. And this is also, you know, clients' rights gone too far is, you know, doing away with workshops and group homes. The group homes are now, it's a violation of federal law, right, against their rights to have a group home. And I have group homes where guys had lived together for 15, 20 years. And where are they going to go? Well, I can tell you where they're going to go. They are going to be going into the nursing homes because that is the next place for them. And it's a shame also with, you know, with the clients' rights, a lot of them that have health problems are allowed by their providers to do all the wrong things. You know, I have some folks who lived in LAD and they were diabetics, you know, and I'd say, hey, Don, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? Well, I had a bowl of Frosted Flakes. You know, that's not the right thing for you. And I'm looking at the provider going, you know that's not the right thing. And I said, well, how big was the bowl? It was this big. And I'm looking at the provider going, it couldn't be that big. And, well, you know, they bought new bowls for us, and they are really this big. And so they have bowls of cereal that big. And a lot of them are diabetics. And he's packing 5 sandwiches for lunch. And I'm going, isn't it a bad idea, because he's diabetic, to let him carry 5 sandwiches with him to lunch? Because he's not just trading them, he's actually eating them, which is really, really bad for him. Well, you know, they have rights, and so we have to allow them to have the right to do that. Oh, my God. And so these folks have health problems, serious health problems. They are not being properly cared for. The nursing homes are going to be taking them in more and more. Unfortunately, they do not belong to the nursing home tribe. You know, if you go to the workshops, there's their tribe. All right? Go to the group home, there's their tribe. That's where they fit in. That's where they belong. That's where they are most comfortable. We're going to take them away from their tribe, and we're going to put them into a nursing home with people who have nothing in common with them. And then we're going to wonder why they have behavior problems. Why are they acting up? Why are they doing this? They're acting like a child. Okay, so now it comes to us. How do we deal with that? And again, it is very difficult because, but the thing to remember, you know, when you're working with the DDS clients, stay concrete. Okay, I'm going to put together plans for them. How do you deal with this situation? I always try to get them to see that, you know what, that person didn't treat you very nicely. However, you putting a hole in the wall was a bad reaction to that. So you do talk plainly, you do talk straightforward. The DDS clients I work with learn very quickly. You know, if you keep it simple. You know, I do in the office, the majority of the time it's brief counseling. You know, I see them for 3 to 6 months, we teach a few things, we reiterate a few things, and they plateau. And then we part ways, and then they'll come back later on when they need some readjustments because things started to be a problem again. So you stay simple, you stay basic, you're very straightforward. If there's a problem, no one wants to directly tell them about it, but that's where we come in. So you are, you know, teaching them how to cope with being in this new world where they're not with their tribe. So.
And being direct is for them.
Right.
We wouldn't do that with many of our other folks.
Right.
DDS.
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Short, concrete, you need to stop doing.
Right. Lonnie was just saying I was brilliant, and that no, Lonnie was Lonnie was reiterating. Lonnie does a lot of work with the DDS clients, and she said the same thing. You know, keep it direct. You almost need to be parental at times. I take a parental tone a lot of times, and I just say, you can't do that. You cannot talk to a woman that way. You cannot do that. Do you understand? And they'll say, yes. Do you understand why you can't do that? And I'll explain that to them, and then I'll say, you cannot do that. Here's what you can do. Here's the rules. Play by these rules, and you're going to be okay. And so I'm not going to do that to most of my other clients. You know, I may want to. So, and the last, again, working with substance abusers. I don't have a good answer for the heroin addicts when they come in. On here I said, wish them luck when they decided to sign themselves out after their boyfriend came to visit. And that's basically where I'm at right now. If anybody has great ideas on how to deal with the young heroin addicts, I've never been able to actually engage in any treatment. They almost always sign themselves out before we even start. You know, maybe somebody has more luck.
Maybe Relias has modules.
Yes, we'll look up the Relias module on that. Working with residents with personality disorders, that is another topic for a whole other day. And so, but in my believer spectrum, personality disorders are on the very, very concrete end. So the behaviors are because they need to test. I need to see if you care about me. So I play the how much do you care game. So the behaviors are all about I need to see that you care about me. It's not I'm acting childish. It's I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I believe you're my friend. The boundary issues and having to deal with so many people in a nursing home drives a borderline absolutely nuts because there's so much uncertainty. And so when you're working with personality disorders, you have to understand they want certainty. And this is an environment that provides very little of that. So yes, they're not going to function very well. So.
Well, Tom, speaking of the content you weren't able to fully address, we've had a couple people online suggest that you do a part 2 of this series. And so you and Stephanie Ryan should get together and schedule that for some time down the road. I know he does. He's one of our best presenters, and you have had oodles of positive feedback online, Tom. A part 2. That's what we need. So
my last piece of advice, make sure you take care of yourselves.
Yes. All right. Everybody who is logged in online, please email me your evaluation forms so that I can mark you for credit and head home for the evening. People who are here in person also come bring me your evaluation forms. If anybody has any follow-up questions for Tom, please just shoot him an email. I'm going to close the webinar now.